All right, we're going to transition to our next topic. This is inspired by another follower. His name is Chris Rinaldi, and we actually have to give him a huge shout out. We're super thankful for him. A lot of people probably don't know this. We produce the podcast through Anchor, and part of Anchor allows you to have listener support, kind of similar to like a Patreon where like people can give monthly. And we like a year ago or whenever we started this, we ticked the box like, sure, we'll just enable that. And we ended up looking and Chris has been supporting our podcast monthly, and genuinely that blows us away and makes us super thankful and pushes us to keep trying to produce helpful resources for all of you. So Chris, thank you a ton for supporting us. And we've been trying to reach out to him, but we didn't know where. And then we found out he emailed us a question. And so we're glad we have contact with him now. And so again, Chris, thank you. I will say that if people do want to support the podcast, within the description of the podcast on the platform you're listening to, there should be a link to the Anchor support page. And so you could sign up for that. It is literally, we have zero expectation of that at all. But people have been reaching out to us asking, how can I actually support you guys financially? Which is a really strange question for us to receive, but here is a way. And so if you guys are interested in that, you should be able to go into the description of the podcast and click the monthly support. And then there's options from there. But again, Chris, thank you. So here's the topic that he brought up. It's really a question about what should be your first super shoe, but I'm going to read it the way that he posed the question. He says, what is the best super shoe for someone with mild to moderate stability needs who's running a marathon for the first time with a super shoe? And I'm only going to be using the shoe for some acclimation to the shoe and then racing. So they're only using the shoe to race in and just get used to it. And it's going to be their first super shoe. They have mild to moderate stability needs. Take that where you want, Matt. What are you thinking?
So, Chris, you're in the same boat as me, as someone who has mild to moderate stability needs. That's always been a really challenging question to try to figure that out. I think, again, it's going to depend on what your body can tolerate, and I'm fortunate that I can handle a variety of things. But when it comes to a marathon distance, you really got to check this out, and you also got to know where the stability needs are coming from. So somebody that has stability needs at the foot, it's going to be very different than somebody who has stability needs at the hip. So it will depend on what's driving it. The shoe that I have enjoyed most, and I think there's going to be some people that are going to disagree with me, which I'm open to, is probably going to be, I don't think so. It's probably going to be this one. Actually.
Oh, really? Not this one?
No, I mean, I have a special place in my heart for the Metaspeed Sky. I love this shoe. I didn't want to, and I've used it for everything. Like,
yeah,
everything I'm not supposed to. So I've used it for like an aggressive trail race. I've used it for a cross country race recently, or around like a 1630 something 5K. The forefoot is really good in the Metaspeed. I think the heel is just a little bit unstable for longer mileage, and I've felt that on the longer tempo runs I've done in it. We haven't tried the Edge yet, so that might be an option. So I'll have to get back to everybody on that. To be honest with you, the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro 2, it would probably be my go-to if you don't have severe stability needs up higher, or if you don't have any stability needs in terms of like supination stuff or any of that stuff, because there is a plate in the rear foot that's designed to be almost like an orthotic. And I feel when I'm running longer distances, this shoe keeps me more lateral. The heel bevel, the plate in the rear foot, and the rods in the forefoot are stiff enough that this actually works like a mild stability shoe for me. And this is the only one I've been like I ran a 10K recently and I was really nervous to try anything, and I grabbed this shoe and I was fine at the end. So even with 10K, sometimes I'll fatigue a little bit at the end. The Adios Pro 2 I was fine in. The only thing I would caution you in is if you have any hip stability issues, the midsole is very soft. It's not a Vaporfly soft, it's still soft, so you would definitely need some time to acclimate. But if it's like stability needs in the foot, you should be fine in something like this. Nathan, I'm curious, and again, the reason I say this is because there's so many, it's not a posted shoe, but there's so many natural mechanisms here, including, like you can see, I mean, I've torn off the poor heel here, but you can see how laterally beveled the heel is, and there's a plate in there that also does the same thing, so it creates a really stable rear foot for somebody that does pronate. Even here at the midfoot, the rear, it's the plate and stuff is so stiff, and the rods are. I know I shredded this. For those of you who can't see on the podcast, I've just absolutely destroyed the posterior lateral heel on this poor pair of Adios Pro 2s. The rods work very well for me. They work very well on Adios Pro 1. There were some mechanical issues on that one that didn't work as well for me, but it's just forefoot is absolutely super stable. Midfoot is stable enough. Rear foot is really stable. So that would probably be my suggestion for a shoe for those that need mild to moderate stability, but can handle something a little softer. I'm curious, Nathan, to know what you think.
Well, quick question about the Adios Pro 2. So there's the medial cutout, right?
Yeah.
So the middle part, the inside of the midsole is cut out.
Yeah.
Why do you think that doesn't play a role? Kind of dig into that a little bit.
That's a really good question. That's actually something I was super nervous about. So again, for those people that can't see, there's a very large cutout in the midfoot. And normally for me, when I'm grading shoes, I'm like, that's a huge no-no. I think that the rods, because they sit fairly close to you, and there's a good number of them, right, that are in there. I think, is there 4 or 5? I can't remember. Mm-hmm. But they run along the foot and they're much closer to the foot. So I think they do a good job of creating enough rigidity that I didn't notice that midfoot cutout at all. In fact, I wonder if they actually had sole there, if it would make it too stiff for some people. So I can kind of understand why they did that.
As someone who hasn't ran in that shoe, I think the way you've described kind of some of the lateral bias of it as well might play a role, where the shoe is honestly guiding you on a path that avoids that area.
I think because of how much stuff is happening at the heel between both the plates. So there are both rods and there's a rear foot plate in this shoe, plus how significant the lateral bevel is. You're going to be on the lateral side, and you're not even going to touch, this cutout. Yeah, because there's so much stuff in the rear foot that'll set you forward there. So you'll probably be fine. So this for mild stability would be my choice. Nathan, what do you think? I think you're about ready to grab something.
No, I was just grabbing the Metaspeed Sky because I knew you've been riding that shoe like mad, but that one is not a stable shoe for me. So I'm definitely not talking about that one. Yeah. There are, I would say, in the ones that I've tested, which is most of them, there are 3 that stand out from a stability standpoint. One of them is unique to the other 2. So the first 2, I'm going to bring them up together, is the Saucony Endorphin Pro. I have the 2nd version here, and the Speed Freak from Skechers. So what these 2 have in common is that the plates are very rigid. They operate off of very gradual but effective rocker sole, and they have a wider base pretty much throughout. So the Pro is a little bit more narrow in the midfoot, but it's still full contact and wider throughout. And so those components create a relatively stable platform, and they don't really flex a lot. And the foam isn't like squishy soft. It's a little bit slightly on the firmer end. And if the shoe works for your mechanics, they're going to be more stable, just with the way that they roll really nicely. The other thing about the Speed Freak is that this plate, the H plate that they have, well, it's kind of it's modified H plate now because it has the 2 sides of it, but it spans the entire width of the forefoot. And so this is probably one of the most stable forefoots that you're going to get in a super shoe. And then there's just no plate in the heel. So if you have rear foot issues, this might not be your best option. But if you have kind of mid to forefoot issues, the Speed Freak can be a really solid choice. The third one, go ahead.
I'd like to totally add that I fully agree, and I should have grabbed the Speed Freak too, as terms of a solid shoe that can be considered a super shoe based on the plate design. The H plate is one of my favorites because I tend to have some forefoot stability issues. I can do a full easy run. I can do a long run in the Speed Freak and not have any problems at all. And that actually might be better if the Adios Pro 2 is too soft. The Speed Freak might actually be a better option. And I will admit, I was careful to say that because I'm obviously very biased, since all the marathons I've done have been in the predecessor to the Speed Freak. So right. there's a little bit of bias there.
Yeah. So I think those 2 are similar. I said wider base, kind of the rocker sole, pretty consistent, a little bit firmer.
I would say of the Endorphins, the Endorphin Pro, I would say version 2, because of some of the upper changes, was more stable for me than version 1.
Yep, totally. The third one that I think kind of enters the most stable shoe of the super shoes for me, but it's different is the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite, which, as everybody knows, is really hard to come by right now. I'm sure it will change. They know the shoe's a banger, and the world's been crazy. I almost feel bad that I have one. Actually, they gave me two.
We actually have two pairs.
I gave my other pair to somebody so they could have one. But so yeah, Pat's got two. So we feel bad. But this one, the reason it's so different is that the rocker is not super pronounced. And the plate is much more flexible. Like when you're running slower paces, or if you're really digging into it, you can flex the plate, no problem. I think what makes this one more stable is the slightly lower stack and the plate design, that it's split through the forefoot. So it kind of allows you to like stabilize yourself on the platform. In the heel, it's very squishy, but because of the position of the plate closer to the heel, this one has been pretty stable. It feels more like a traditional trainer that is just super light and has really fun bounce to it, but a little bit slightly lower profile that gives it some of that stability. So these two are stable for one reason for me, and then the Deviate Nitro Elite for another reason. What do you think? Do you agree with that one on this?
I definitely agree. I think I've been so cautious using the Deviate Nitro Elite that I have only taken it on one like 10-mile threshold run, and I was like, oh, that was so great, but I don't want to do that again because there's not that, like, it's hard. If I ever want another pair, I can't,
dude, you have two pairs.
Yeah, I know, but like, I'm just, when they're hard to come by. We have please, by the way, don't ask us if we're going to sell these to you. We have a very specific rule that we do not sell any of the shoes that are sent to us. When we run through them, we will usually give them to individuals in need. Like I have a couple high schools local to me that I'll send shoes to, or individuals that I know that need a pair of shoes that I'll send them to, but we please don't ask them to go to sell them. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to come by. So I've been trying, I got the review out. I'm like, I got to save this for like special race day. And then it's white, right? So I'm not going to take it on dirt. So I'll just take the Metaspeed Sky on everything.
That's hilarious. You should use one of the pairs more.
Yeah. A couple honorable mentions, and I know some people are probably going to bring this up, but the other ones that could be considered, but there's some small issues with them. I've jogged around in a store in the Brooks Hyperion Elite 2. I didn't purchase it because there were some problems with the upper, which I understand they're working on for version 3. I think the way that shoe is set up is really good. Version 1 is super firm, so I purchased it and it was very stable because it was so rocketed and so stiff, but I think it's too stiff for most people to use for marathon distances. I used it for a 5K one time and it was fine, and then the other thing would probably be the 361 Flame, but I would honestly not suggest using this shoe for a marathon because it is so stiff. It feels great if you're running a 5K, but I think there's some work that needs to be done on this shoe because it's so firm and stiff, which for me made it too stable, actually, where it was so rigid. My mechanics were like, I was getting thrown all over the place because I had a hard time getting over it. Although, to be fair, this is supposed to fit a half size small. So, or what, half size large? What's the term I'm using?
It fits large. You should you should go a half size down.
Yeah, I went true to size, and I like the extra room, but I think my foot's hitting the plate the wrong way. So it's super stiff, and it's not something I would suggest using for a marathon unless you love super firm shoes. So with
how stiff this shoe is, if you're hitting the rocker in the wrong spot, it's going to feel really bad. So I'm a half size down, and I hit the rocker in the right spot. I will say for me, it's really, really firm, the foam, and front to back, it's really, really rigid. Yep. And so I think the problem there for me is that if I hit, or if I'm getting tired and I start hitting a little bit on the side, it actually throws me because it's so firm that it doesn't really compress a ton. So it feels like it just throws me back and forth. So I'm with Matt. If you're doing something that you're going to get really wicked tired in for a long time, this would not be my choice. So
I think for shorter distances, it might be fine if you're hitting the ground really hard and you're engaging the foam on the plate. But anything longer, so honorable mention, but I'd be cautious with on the Hyperion
honorable
Elite,
mention from a stable standpoint.
Yeah, the Hyperion Elite 2 would be an honorable mention, but you have to make sure the upper is working for you. I've had a lot of people comment on blistering and problems like that, so I might wait for version 3, which is supposed to be pretty good. We've talked a little bit, but My biggest suggestion would probably be like Nathan mentioned, the Speed Freak is a really good one based on if you need forefoot stability. The other one, if you can handle some of the softer platform, will be the Audios Pro 2, just based on how the rear foot is set up and then the forefoot being stable. Another option would be the Endorphin Pro 2, but I would put that more at mild if you have mild stability needs. And then there's some other things that we can talk about. Yeah. But
I think if we take this and we back way up, you know, the question is, what should be my first super shoe, you know, within a marathon? And I think there's so many different areas to consider this question. We talked last time about, I think it was last time or 2 times ago, who actually benefits from super shoes. And I think just to globally remember a couple things. One, define what benefit means for you. If benefit means getting through a marathon healthy, that's a whole other question. If benefit is what shoe is going to help me with the most running economy, the reality is that we don't know how to pair a person to which super shoe is going to help them the most from an economic benefit standpoint, because McLeod et al. Did that one, and even in the 4% study had such a range. And so there's enough variables that we don't know how to control, that each person is going to do a little bit better from an economic standpoint in different shoes. So make sure you're asking that question. And we're not going to dive into this right now because we kind of talked about it last time, but just make sure you're asking that question. What does it mean for me to benefit from a super shoe? Does it mean I'm going to stay healthy in my marathon? Which that begs a ton of questions about, do you need a super shoe for it?
Do you even need a racing shoe?
Exactly. Right? Exactly. So just keep those things in mind. We had fun talking about like where the stability elements are in these shoes. And if people are wanting to buy a super shoe for their marathon, that's what we wanted to kind of talk about, but just keep that in the back of your head as we go.
Just remember that just because it's quote unquote a super shoe doesn't mean all the super things are super positive. There are certainly some risks, right? So anything, right? There can be some benefits. There can also be some serious risks. At the end of the day, you want to make sure you finish your race. And do not be afraid to go, you know what? My daily training shoe is the shoe I'm going to use for a marathon, because you know that that's shoe is something reliable and you can trust. And I would say especially for an introduction to someone like doing either a first marathon or a marathon you want to make sure you finish, sometimes just taking your daily training shoe might be the best option, or even a lightweight trainer, right? There's some really good options out there that may not have a plate, but still are like solid ones right now. Like if I had to go run a marathon tomorrow after doing a long run today, I'd probably choose the Puma Magnify. Did I say that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Because that's just a shoe that I trust, and I've been able to do long runs in that shoe. That's the shoe I grab when I'm beat up and I need something to like protect me over long miles. So it just depends on what your goals and your needs are and what your mechanics can handle. Because if you're going to run these shoes, you need to make sure you acclimate to them, because there's some risks associated with them as well. It's not all, PRs and tasty goo shots. There's some nasty goo shots in there too. I don't know where I'm going with this.
I don't know what you're talking about. Perfect. So I think that's everything that we wanted to cover today. Matt, do you have anything else you want to bring up?
Yeah, just remember, with all the stuff that we talk about, please remember that all of this is general. You as an individual are going to be different from anybody else. So remember, whether you're reading reviews, whether you're trying to figure stuff out, remember you need to make sure this is applying to you, not the general public, to you. Each person is different. They have different needs, different mechanics, different race goals, different training. You're unique. You do not have to do what everybody else is doing. You have to find what works for you. So some people work very well in super shoes. Some people can actually train full time in them. I would not do that. Some people don't respond well to those, and they respond better to shoes that are a little bit more flexible, don't have a plate, maybe lighter, maybe heavier. You just need to find out what works for you. There's plenty of people right now, like Camila Heron, right? So the pro athlete for Hoka is running, what is she running? She's like some super long ultra marathon, and she's running in the next version of the Rincon. I can barely speak English. It's something. Fine. Somebody tell me. She's running in the Hoka Rincon, which is their like lightweight shoe that can definitely be a lightweight trainer or a racing shoe, and there's no plate in it. And I think she's doing fine. So just find what works for you and what's most comfortable, because what's most comfortable is probably what's going to get you through that finish line.
You talked about, this is unrelated, but you talked
Yeah.
about just, if I were to happen to run a marathon last minute, I'll just invite you again. Come on out to Wisconsin, run my marathon with
Oh,
me,
I'm
October 3rd.
The
Come
only
on
thing
over.
I'm scared that I'm not going to want to leave. That's what I'm concerned about.
Lakefront Marathon. Come on
know.
over. If anyone's going to be there, let me know. I'd love
Yeah.
to meet people. But Matt, you can come. You can come run it with me. You can pace me. Pace
All
me
right.
at my. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to run it in. Not, but whatever I end up running in, you can run next to me.
Okay.
You could do that, no problem.
Yeah.
So just kidding. You don't need to do that. Anywho,